Ignition. Liftoff.
Roger, this is Liberty Bell 7. The clock is operating.
Loud and clear, Jose. Don't cry too much.
Okie doke. Okay, it's a nice ride up to now.
Loud and clear.
Such a fascinating view out the window, you just can't help but look out that way. Now I can see the Cape, and boy, that's some sight.
Hello fellow space enthusiasts. This is the first of 3 videos looking into one of the biggest mysteries to emerge from the early space race. In this video, I will cover the background and the mission of Gus Grissom's Mercury flight. There's a lot to unpack, so let's launch straight into it.
This is Liberty Bell 7. We are go.
After the successful flight of Alan Shepard aboard Freedom 7, NASA launched the second of its manned Mercury flights. Mercury-Redstone 4 would probably have been one of the most unremarkable space flights ever flown and lost to the pages of history if it hadn't have been for what happened at the end of the mission. It was all part of the United States Project Mercury, a series of missions designed to find out if humans could survive the rigours of spaceflight. Whereas the Soviets had gone straight to orbital flights, the United States used the Mercury-Redstone launch vehicle with its 78,000 pounds of thrust to launch its spacecraft on suborbital missions. This type of mission profile would subject both spacecraft and astronaut to all the aspects of an expedition into space, but with some of the hazards removed. The exposure to the space environment was very limited, and the trajectory it would take meant that it didn't rely on any kind of engine firing to bring the spacecraft back down to the Earth. At one time it was envisioned that there would be a lot more of these types of missions. As Dr. Robert Vos, one of the men who trained the astronauts, noted, one ascent for each of the astronauts. Something backed up by Deke Slayton, one of the original Mercury astronauts, who said, "We had all assumed we were going to fly Redstones to qualify us for Atlases." After President Kennedy had set America on course for the moon, the first flight up after his epic speech was to be flown by United States Air Force Captain Virgil Ivan Gus Grissom. But according to a story recounted in the book Moonshot, Grissom was lucky to be there at all. In the book, it claims that he had been a passenger in a Corvette being driven by 1960 Indianapolis 500 winner Gene Rathman. Driving back to the Space Center one evening before the mission, Rathman, who was showing off, took a corner too fast and spun off the road at high speed, leaving both of them stranded in a salt marsh. Escaping both injury and detection, which could have led to him being grounded and replaced by his backup John Glenn, he was thankful to walk away unscathed. On the 21st of July 1961, Grissom arrived at Launch Complex 5 and climbed into Mercury spacecraft number 11 and waited through the countdown for his pioneering rocket ride into space. At 35, he was the youngest Mercury pilot at the time of his flight, a mission that would see him become only the 3rd human to enter the realm of space. Not until Gemini 5 and Gordon Cooper's decision to have a mission patch did any of the missions have individual patches, so to personalise their flights, the Mercury astronauts named their spacecraft. Grissom chose Liberty Bell 7 after the iconic symbol of America, going as far as painting a crack onto its side to replicate the one on the bell. He also included the number 7 in the name of the spacecraft, but unlike Shepard, who had used it to denote that he was flying aboard Mercury spacecraft number 7, this time the 7 represented the 7 astronauts. Little did Grissom know that he would be heading into space with the world's first ashtray on board. After the spacecraft was recovered in 1999, a cigarette butt was found, along with a plastic cup used to catch its ash. It's incredible to think that anyone was allowed to smoke anywhere near the spacecraft, let alone deposit their spent cigarette butt and makeshift ashtray into its base. In anticipation of the upcoming orbital flights, Spacecraft 11 had a couple of important modifications. It had a new large window for Earth observations and spacecraft orientation, instead of the 2 portholes used on Freedom 7, and it also had a new side hatch. The hatch being tested on this flight was opened explosively instead of mechanically, and at 23 pounds it was lighter than the one used on Shepard's flight, which weighed 69 pounds. The matter of entering and exiting the cockpit had gone through several configurations before settling on an openable side hatch.
What about the hatch?
The hatch.
Yeah, the hatch. We need a hatch with explosive bolts that we can open ourselves.
Some early ideas had the hatch being welded into place and the astronauts having to open the side like someone using a can opener. Then there was some discussion about having the pilot exit the spacecraft via the top hatch, as shown here with Grissom during training. But this proved to be a strenuous process, as demonstrated here by the exertion Shepard is showing. In the end, this method was only used once by Scott Carpenter at the end of his mission when he landed off target and had to wait for the recovery forces to get to him. The mechanical hatch on Freedom 7 added too much weight for the upcoming orbital flights, so the explosive hatch design was considered ideal. Christopher Kraft, the Mercury flight director, wrote, "It was fast, lighter in weight, gave a tighter seal on the pressure vessel, and would let rescue crews get in much quicker. The hatch was held in place by 70 titanium bolts with holes in them to give them a point of failure, and was released by what is commonly called an explosive charge. It was actually released by igniting a mild detonating fuse, or MDF, installed around the hatch, which caused an increase in gas pressure between the two seals, causing the bolts to fail and unlocking the hatch. In an emergency, the MDF could be ignited in two ways. The first way was to depress a plunger inside the cockpit, using about 5 pounds of force. Bob Thompson, who worked in the recovery operations branch, described in detail the actual process. There's a cap that covered the plunger that fired the door. You had to turn it and take that off. Then you had to reach up and put your finger in a ring and pull a pin out of the shaft on the plunger that fired the door, and then push a little 50-cent sized plunger in. Once the plunger went in about an inch, it lined up a hole that the firing pin came through that fired the door. This method wasn't the preferred method, because it was known to cause hand injuries due to the pressure build-up that was used to shear the bolts, causing the plunger to recoil. The second method was to open a panel on the exterior of the spacecraft that covered a lanyard that could be released and pulled. To use this method with the safety pin still in place required a force of at least 40 pounds to break the pin and ignite the MDF. During the use of either of these methods, 2 retaining wires could be attached to prevent the hatch flying off and injuring anyone on the outside. This new hatch would cause trouble for Grissom at both the beginning and the end of his flight. As he waited in his specially body contoured couch, the launch was put on hold. As Gunter Wendt noted in his book, The Unbroken Chain, one of the bolts got cross-threaded, and we called a hold in the count so that engineering management could assess the situation. The recommendation was for the countdown to continue, because with only one of the 70 hatch bolts being misaligned, the others provided enough integrity to keep the hatch in place. No doubt this decision pleased the man inside the spacecraft, who had already gone through a countdown on the 19th of July to the T-minus 10 minute and 30-second mark, before it had been scrubbed due to unfavourable weather. After this launch scrub, according to NASA press officer Shorty Powers, Grissom had made some not quotable remarks. Another launch attempt on the 18th of July had also been scrubbed because of unfavourable cloud cover in the launch area. Grissom's comments after this had been more restrained. "I'm ready whenever you are." The only nagging worry he had now was a sore throat, but he kept that to himself, for fear it might delay the mission yet again. Grissom would spend about 3 hours and 22 minutes inside the spacecraft waiting to launch. During this time, he talked to his wife Betty, who later revealed, "The boys and I talked by telephone to Gus as he lay flat on his back in the capsule before it was launched. He said if we stopped talking, he could go to sleep." Finally, Grissom was launched at 7:20 AM Eastern Standard Time and shared a joke with Capcom Shepard.
Liftoff.
Roger, this is Liberty Bell 7. The clock is operating.
Loud and clear, Jose. Don't cry too much.
Okie doke. Okay, it's a nice ride up to now.
Loud and clear.
The Redstone launch vehicle fired for about 2 minutes and 23 seconds, placing Liberty Bell 7 on course to curve upwards into space and then downwards to a splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean, 15 minutes and 37 seconds after liftoff. According to the NASA website, the spacecraft reached an altitude of 118.3 miles, a maximum velocity of 5,134 miles per hour, and travelled a distance downrange from the launch pad of 302 miles. As the spacecraft curved over the top of its path, Grissom became a space pilot. He didn't like the name astronaut. "I'm not ass anything, I'm a pilot," he once remarked. As he operated the controls of the spacecraft, the Earth came into view. He was entranced by the sight of the window, and having been assigned less tasks to perform in space than Shepard, he was able to spend more time on Earth observations.
I'm on the window. It's such a fascinating view out the window, you just can't help but look out that way.
I understand.
Now I can see the Cape, and boy, that's some sight.
He later recalled, "When I was weightless, about 100 miles up, almost at the apogee of the flight, I could look down and see Cape Canaveral, sharp and clear. I could pick out the Banana River and see the peninsula, which runs farther south. Then I spotted the south coast of Florida. Although not needed for this flight, the retro rockets were test fired, and all too soon Grissom was coming back down to the Earth, experiencing a maximum load of 11G, but he was well prepared for such forces, having trained in the centrifuge. The drogue parachute deployed at 21,000 feet, followed by the main parachute deployment at 12,300 feet. During main parachute deployment, a sound fixing and ranging explosive device was released and fell into the ocean, and was set to explode at a depth of 4,000 feet. This would be picked up by the sonar on the recovery ships and give a direction in which to head towards the spacecraft. Looking out of the window, Grissom could see that there were a couple of small perforations in the main chute, but they did not spread, and as the spacecraft slowly descended, he felt the impact bag deploy, and he readied himself for splashdown in the ocean. As Liberty Bell 7 completed its mission, Grissom went through his post-splashdown tasks, and then called in the recovery helicopter to retrieve both he and the spacecraft. What happened next has divided opinion ever since.
The astronaut. Virgil Grissom is out of the capsule, swimming in the water. The capsule itself is apparently sinking lower into the water, and there is fear that it might sink completely below the surface of the water.